Hi there, my name's Sophie Weiner, and today I'm going to talk to you about addressing modern day racism. So a few major points. I'm going to discuss my role and your role in the grand scheme of things, a personal connection I have to racism, and being aware of implicit bias and the different types of racism that still exist today, in addition to changing the language. So what is my role as a privileged white woman who grew up in the suburbs of Westfield, New Jersey? Well, it truly is to share stories of others who've experienced it around me with you all today. So I have a personal connection. My cousins, Amma and Tismark, are both mixed race. My uncle is Black and is from Ghana, and my aunt is white. Now, both of them truly have experienced not very much diversity in their whole life. They grew up in the white suburbs of rural Albany, New York, and I remember Amma growing up and truly always having to compensate for being different and being among just white population that had a very different culture from her. And also Tismark. They both had to compensate from being different by being the smartest and best at every sport. And Amma grew up having to straighten her hair every day to feel like she fit in with the other white girls at school. Now, this invisible racism and this toxic culture that still exists in modern day is what we have to address in order to not just see racism as something like hate crimes and structural racism that used to be in the past, like segregation, and see it still existing as separation today in the culture of everywhere in society. So where we start is understanding implicit versus explicit bias and the different types of racism. We have personal and interpersonal racism. So how I view the world and how others teach each other about viewing the world. And there's also structural racism, which has been like segregation and hate crimes and how society has worked around racism and the conscious acts of discrimination. And also institutional racism is a different type that is mostly due to structural racism. And institutionally, healthcare, insurance, and mental health services are not available equally to all different races. And these are the things we have to look at modern day on how we can change and continue changing our institution. Now, implicit bias is the unconscious acts and thoughts of discrimination that continue today. Explicit bias is hate speech and segregation, and there are many different forms, but implicit bias is what truly is the invisible racism that allows it to continue to today. So we need to be aware of this implicit bias and noticing our preferences and others' preferences on how we view others around ourselves. And segregation is illegal, but there's still so many different things that separate us to today. And questioning who, how, and why we interact with others around us is a good way to start. A quote from Denise Hamilton, an inclusion strategist and author, has amazing impact on what I'm talking about. She states, in American culture, we use the same word, racism, for KKK members during a cross-burning on a lawn, and also a teacher telling Black students not to apply to a certain college because they believe they won't get in. Now, these two different scenarios are both labeled racism, but the scary cover that racism has is allowing people to not speak about it still existing today. The KKK may be not in front of our eyes existing, but all of these little setbacks for people of a different race still exist today. So accepting this racist culture as still being alive is important to discuss. And we have to change the language of racism. Ultimately, using group activities at home, school, and work to address the types of racism that are still apparent today. And not only teaching about slavery at school and segregation, which I believe I only learned about, we need to know about these modern day institutional racism examples in order to change the future. And I believe that's the best way to get started. Thank you very much.